They thought no one was home. The HOA Karen walked right up to my front door, unlocked it with her master key, and started stepping inside like she owned the place. What she didn't know was that I was inside, and I was watching everything. The moment she crossed that threshold, her entire plan fell apart. The first thing I heard was the click. Not the polite, hollow tap of knuckles on wood. Not the doorbell. A metallic click, sharp and deliberate, like a lock being turned by someone who believed they had every right to do so. I froze in my chair. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind that made the house feel bigger than it was. Rain drummed lightly against the windows. My coffee steamed beside my laptop. I had taken the day off work to catch up on overdue repairs. Some drywall, a leaky sink, the usual homeowner stuff. And now someone was unlocking my front door. Slowly, silently, I stood and moved toward the hallway. Every step felt too loud. The floorboards whispered under my weight. My heart was suddenly pounding in my ears. The door creaked open. A woman stepped inside. She was in her late 40s or early 50s, wearing a beige cardigan, slacks, and sensible shoes. Her hair was cut into that sharp, no-nonsense bob that screamed I manage things. In her hand was a clipboard. Hanging from her wrist was a keyring with at least a dozen keys. HOA Karen. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her, though never to her face. Her real name was Linda, but no one ever used it. She was the vice president of the Homeowners Association and acted like the entire street was her personal kingdom. She didn't look surprised to be inside my house. That was the most terrifying part. She took 2 steps forward, scanning the entryway like she was inspecting a hotel room. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Unacceptable," she muttered, scribbling something on her clipboard. I stayed hidden behind the hallway wall, watching. My pulse hammered. This was my home, my private property, and she had just let herself in. No notice, no knock, no permission. She moved deeper into the house, peeking into the living room, then toward the kitchen. Her shoes clicked against the tile. She wrinkled her nose at the stack of mail on the counter. "Violation," she said softly, writing again. Every instinct screamed at me to shout, to confront her, to tell her to get out. But something told me to wait. I wanted to see how far she would go. Karen reached the kitchen window and looked outside, then tugged the blinds aside. She leaned forward, inspecting the backyard. "Still hasn't trimmed the hedges," she muttered. Figures. That was it. I stepped into the open. "Enjoying the tour?" She gasped so hard she nearly dropped her clipboard. Karen spun around, eyes wide. For the first time since entering my house, she looked like someone who realized she had made a very bad mistake. You're supposed to be at work," she stammered. "Not today," I replied calmly. "And even if I were, why are you in my house?" Her face flushed. I have HOA authorization," she snapped, lifting her clipboard like a shield. "We conduct inspections for compliance. You unlocked my door." "Yes, well, sometimes homeowners aren't available and you broke into my house." Her mouth opened, then closed. She straightened her shoulders. "This community is governed by rules," she said. "We have the right to enter properties to insure." "You do not," I cut in. "Not without notice. Not without consent. And definitely not with a master key." She hesitated. "You signed HOA paperwork when you bought the house," she said, though there was a crack in her confidence now. "No," I replied. "I didn't." She scoffed. "Everyone here is in the HOA." "No," I said again. "I'm not." Karen laughed nervously. "That's impossible. Your address is on our list." "Your list is wrong." She stared at me like I'd just told her the sky was green. "That doesn't make sense," she said. "You pay HOA fees. You follow HOA guidelines. You've been cited before." "I've ignored your letters," I corrected. "Because my property is not part of your association." Her eyes flicked down to her clipboard. She flipped a page. Then another. "You're in Block C," she said. "Lot 14. And Block C was annexed into the HOA in 2005, I replied. My house was not. Her face tightened. That's not how it works. That's exactly how it works, I said. My deed predates the HOA expansion. I never signed. I never agreed. You have no jurisdiction here. Karen's lips pressed together. You're mistaken. I'm not. You are. I can prove it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped against the window. The air between us felt heavy, charged. Then she straightened up, putting on her authority voice. Until this is clarified, she said, you are required to comply with HOA regulations. I laughed. You broke into my house. I entered for inspection. You trespassed. She bristled. We'll see what the board says. Good, I said. Because the board is about to learn something very expensive. Karen turned toward the door. This isn't over, she said. I know, I replied. And as she stepped out of my house, the house she had just illegally entered, I knew something bigger had just started. Something she was not prepared for. By the time Karen's beige sedan rolled out of my driveway, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Someone had just walked into my home like they owned it. I locked the door behind her and slid the deadbolt with a satisfying clack. Then I stood there for a moment, staring at the wood grain, replaying every second of what had just happened. The clipboard, the keys, the way she spoke like I was a tenant instead of the legal owner. She had been so confident. That confidence came from one thing, paperwork. And if I was right, hers was wrong. I went straight to my home office and pulled open the bottom file drawer. Inside were thick folders, all neatly labeled from when I'd bought the place years ago. Deed, survey, title insurance, old zoning maps, everything the realtor had told me to keep just in case. Looks like just in case had finally arrived. I spread everything across my desk. The rain outside had turned into a steady downpour, a gray curtain that made the room feel closed in. It was just me, a desk lamp, and the truth buried somewhere in a pile of legal language. I found my deed first. Lot 14, Block C. The same words Karen had used. But there it was, clear as day. Property excluded from mandatory homeowners association per recorded subdivision amendment, 2005. I let out a slow breath. Not in HOA. Next came the map. The HOA expansion had swallowed most of the old neighborhood 20 years ago. But when developers came knocking, not everyone sold. A handful of homes, including mine, were grandfathered out. We kept our original zoning and independence, even as cookie-cutter houses sprang up around us. The HOA never liked that. They wanted control, dues, authority. But legally? They had none over me. Which meant Karen hadn't just trespassed. She had broken the law. I scanned everything into my computer, saving copies to a cloud drive. If the HOA wanted a fight, I was going to make sure I had ammunition. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered it on the second ring. Hello? This is Linda Harper with the Homeowners Association, Karen's voice said, suddenly smooth and professional. We need to discuss today's incident. I agree, I said. You illegally entered my home. A pause. We entered for inspection. You used a key on a private residence that is not part of your association. Another pause, longer this time. That's under review, she said. I have the deed, I replied. And the zoning map. And the recorded exclusion. That information may be outdated. It's recorded with the county. Her tone sharpened. You've been receiving HOA notices for years. You've been sending them illegally. Sir. You trespassed, I said calmly. If you step foot on my property again without my permission, I will call the police. Her breath hissed through the line. The board will handle this. I hope they do, I said and hung up. I didn't wait. Within the hour, I had emailed a local property attorney, attached every document I had, and explained what happened. I also filed a non-emergency police report for unlawful entry, just to create a paper trail. Karen had no idea how badly she'd messed up. The next day, the retaliation started. First came the letter. Not mailed, hand-delivered. It was taped to my door. Notice of HOA violations. It read in bold red letters. Underneath was a list. Yard maintenance, exterior appearance, window coverings, mailbox style. I laughed out loud. They were bluffing. Trying to intimidate me into compliance. I took a photo, then peeled it off and tossed it in the trash. 2 hours later, a white pickup truck from the HOA rolled slowly past my house. A man leaned out the window, snapping pictures. I walked outside and waved. He sped off. By that evening, I had an email from the HOA board demanding I attend an emergency meeting to resolve my status. They were panicking, because if I was right, and I was, their master list of properties was wrong. And that meant years of illegal fees, enforcement, and possibly lawsuit. My attorney called me the next morning. "You're not in the HOA," she said. "Not even close." Good. And what they did was a serious violation. Entering your home with a master key? That's not just civil, it could be criminal. I smiled for the first time since Karen walked through my door. "Let them try something," I said. "They probably will." That afternoon, Karen herself showed up again, this time with 2 men in polo shirts and clipboards. I didn't open the door. She knocked. "Sir, we need to speak." "You can leave. This will only get worse." "For you," I said through the door. She went quiet. I watched through the peephole as she glared at the house like it had personally betrayed her. Then she turned and walked away. But the war had begun. And the HOA had no idea they were fighting someone who didn't belong to them at all. By the 3rd day, the HOA had gone quiet. No letters. No trucks. No Karen. That silence felt wrong. I knew from experience that when bullies stop barking, it usually means they're planning their next bite. I was in my garage when it happened. The space was half workshop, half sanctuary, pegboards lined with tools, shelves of old projects, and a dusty workbench where I fixed everything from lawn mowers to busted radios. It was where I went when I needed to think. And I had a lot to think about. My phone buzzed. A text from my attorney. "Attorney, they requested your property file from the county this morning." I smiled. Good. That meant they were scrambling. Then I heard it. The low crunch of tires on gravel. I stepped to the garage door and cracked it open just enough to look out. A black SUV was parked across the street. And behind it, a white utility truck. HOA logo on the door. My jaw tightened. They hadn't come to talk. They had come to do something. 2 men got out of the truck, both wearing hard hats and neon safety vests. Karen stepped out of the SUV, clipboard in hand, scanning my property like a hawk. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit record. They walked straight to my side yard. That was where my electrical meter and utility hookups were. "No," I muttered. I stepped outside. "Get off my property," I called. Karen didn't even flinch. "We're here for an inspection." "You don't have authority to inspect anything." She flipped a page on her clipboard. "This lot is listed under HOA jurisdiction. That list is wrong." She looked at me like a bored teacher dealing with a slow student. "The board has confirmed otherwise." The 2 men had already started walking toward my meter box. "Stop," I said. "If you touch anything, you're committing another violation." Karen smirked. "We're allowed to verify utilities for compliance." "You're trespassing." "Sir, you're being uncooperative. And you're being illegal." One of the men reached for the latch on my meter box. I raised my phone higher. "This is being recorded." He hesitated. Karen snapped, "Do your job." The latch clicked open. That was the moment. The exact second they crossed from harassment into something much worse. I dialed 911. "Yes," I said calmly, watching them pry open the panel. "I need police at my address. The Homeowners Association is trespassing and tampering with my electrical service." Karen's head whipped toward me. "You wouldn't dare." "Already did." She stormed toward me. Hang up that phone. No. You're interfering with HOA operations. You're committing a crime. Behind her, one of the workers suddenly jumped back. Karen. What? There's a red tag here. My heart skipped. Red tags meant one thing: utility warnings. Karen marched back over. What kind of red tag? It says protected service. Private grid. Her face went pale. My property had its own independent power line, installed years ago because of my workshop equipment. It was not tied into the HOA-managed infrastructure, which meant they weren't just trespassing. They were tampering with a protected utility. Karen slowly turned back to me. What is that? My property, I said. Which you don't control. The sound of sirens cut through the air. Karen froze. 2 patrol cars pulled up within minute. The officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts, eyes scanning the scene. What's going on? One of them asked. I spoke first. These people are from the HOA. They entered my property without permission and opened my electrical panel. Karen opened her mouth to argue. The officer raised a hand. Ma'am, is that true? We were conducting a lawful inspection. Do you have permission from the property owner? No, but... Do you have a warrant? No. The officer nodded. Then you're trespassing. Karen's voice wavered. This property is part of the HOA. I handed the officer my folder, copies of my deed, the zoning map, and the recorded exclusion. Actually, it's not. The officer scanned the documents, then looked at Karen. This says he's excluded. That must be outdated. It's county recorded, I said. It's current. The second officer walked over to the utility box. They also opened a protected service panel. Karen looked like she might faint. That's a serious issue, he said. Potential felony. Her clipboard slipped from her fingers and hit the ground. I didn't know, she whispered. That's not a defense, the first officer replied. They separated us and started taking statements. By the time they were done, Karen and the 2 workers were being escorted back to their vehicles. One of the officers turned to me. If they come back, call us immediately. I will. As they drove away, Karen looked back at my house. This time, there was no confidence, only fear. Because now she knew the truth. She had picked a fight with someone she had no power over. And the consequences were just beginning. Karen didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. From my bedroom window, I could see the faint glow of my security monitor reflecting off the glass. Every camera on my property was running: front yard, side yard, driveway, backyard, garage. After what happened earlier, I wasn't taking chances. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed. Attorney. They filed an emergency compliance request. I let out a slow breath. Of course they did. HOAs always tried to bury you in paperwork when intimidation failed. They're claiming safety violations, my attorney continued. Electrical hazard. Structural risk. They're pushing for forced access. On property they don't own. I know. But they're desperate. I sat up in bed. What's our move? We counter with evidence. I smiled into the dark. Good. Because I've got plenty. By morning, the HOA had plastered my door with notices. Red ink. Big words. Violation. Immediate action required. Failure to comply. Karen's handwriting was unmistakable. I peeled one off and laughed. They were digging themselves deeper. Inside, I opened my laptop and started assembling the file that would bury them. Video footage. Timestamp. Audio recordings. Property deeds. County exclusion filings. Utility permit. Independent power grid certification. Police incident report. Each piece was another brick in the wall they had just slammed into. By noon, my attorney called back. Send everything, he said. Every angle. Every second. You'll have it in 10. While the files uploaded, I watched the street outside. A silver sedan rolled up. HOA logo on the door. Karen stepped out. She walked slowly this time, not with her usual swagger, more like someone approaching a wild animal. She didn't knock. She waited. I stepped onto the porch. "What do you want?" I asked. Karen swallowed. "We need to talk." "We already did. With the police. This is different." "Funny. You said the same thing before trespassing." She flinched. "Look," she said, lowering her voice. "There's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding is ordering the wrong coffee. You broke into my home." "We didn't. You unlocked my door without notice. I have it on video." Her eyes darted toward the camera above the porch. "The board wasn't aware you were home," she said. "Which makes it worse." Karen exhaled. "We just want to resolve this quietly." "Quietly?" I laughed. "You tried to cut my power. That was a contractor mistake. You told him to do it." She didn't deny it. "Karen," I said calmly, "you and your HOA have crossed multiple legal lines. Trespassing. Attempted utility tampering. False filings. Harassment." She bit her lip. "What do you want?" "An apology won't cut it." "I meant, what will make this go away?" I leaned against the doorframe. "You don't get to decide that anymore." Her face tightened. "You're going to sue us. I'm going to expose you. That would destroy the association." "You already did." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Karen whispered, "You don't understand what you're doing." "Oh, I do." I stepped back inside and closed the door. An hour later, my attorney called again. "You just won the first round." "What happened?" "They withdrew their emergency request." I smiled. "Already?" "After reviewing the footage you sent, they panicked." "Good. But they're not done," he warned. "They'll try something else. I'm counting on it. Because now I wanted them to." Every move they made added to the case. Every letter, every visit, every threat, all of it became evidence. And they were handing it to me. That afternoon, I got a knock. Not Karen this time. Two people stood on my porch, a man in a gray suit and a woman holding a tablet. "Mr. Hale?" the man asked. "Yes. We're from the HOA's legal counsel." I laughed out loud. They shifted uncomfortably. "We'd like to discuss a resolution," the woman said. "I'm sure you would." They stepped inside at my invitation, eyes scanning the cameras as they walked. "Your client is in serious trouble," I told them. "You know that." The man cleared his throat. "We're aware there were procedural errors. Crimes. Alleged crimes. I have video." Silence. The woman looked down at her tablet. "What are you seeking?" "First," I said, "a written admission that my property is not under HOA jurisdiction." The man nodded. "Second, a formal apology on HOA letterhead." Another nod. "Third, compensation for harassment, attempted utility interference, and emotional distress." "How much?" the woman asked carefully. I gave them a number. Their eyes widened. "That's substantial." "So was your mistake." They whispered to each other. Finally, the man said, "We'll need board approval." "Of course. But if we can meet your terms, you might avoid court." "Might." They left in a hurry. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the house quiet except for the hum of my independent power system, the very thing they tried to tamper with. Karen had wanted control. Instead, she had given me something far more valuable: proof. And now, no matter what the HOA tried next, it would only make what was coming even worse for them. The HOA folded faster than I expected. 2 days after their lawyers left my house, an envelope arrived by certified mail. Thick, heavy, the kind that carried consequences. Inside was everything they had promised. A formal letter on HOA letterhead acknowledging that my property was not part of their jurisdiction. A signed apology from the board for unauthorized entry, improper enforcement actions, and emotional distress. And a settlement agreement offering more money than I had ever seen attached to a piece of paper. Karen's signature was on every page. I read it 3 times just to make sure it was real. Then I called my attorney. They're done, he said after reviewing it. They know if this goes to court, they lose. Badly. Good. But there's one more thing, he added. They've requested a non-disclosure clause. I smiled. Of course they did. They didn't just want to pay, they wanted to bury what they'd done. No, I said. No NDA. There was a pause. That may complicate things. Then let it. 3 hours later, the phone rang again. They dropped the NDA, my attorney said. They're terrified. I laughed. Sign it. And just like that, it was over. Or so they thought. The check arrived the next morning. I held it in my hands for a long time. This wasn't just money. It was validation. Proof that I had been right to stand my ground, to document everything, to refuse to be bullied by people who thought a clipboard gave them power. I deposited it. Then I did something even more satisfying. I posted everything. The footage of Karen unlocking my door. The video of them opening my electrical panel. The police report. The HOA's apology letter. The settlement confirmation. All of it went online. And it exploded. Within hours, my story was everywhere. HOA caught trespassing. Board member breaks into home. Association pays after illegal entry. The comments poured in. People sharing their own HOA horror stories. Lawyers explaining just how badly the board had messed up. Even former HOA board members admitting they'd seen similar abuse of power. And Karen? She went quiet. A week later, I found out why. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. Karen was removed. So was the treasurer. And the compliance officer. And 2 other members who had signed off on the forced entry. The association hired an outside management company to take over. They also sent every homeowner a letter explaining what had happened, a watered-down version, of course, and apologizing for recent leadership failures. In other words, they tried to pretend it had all been a misunderstanding. But nobody bought it, because the videos were still out there. One afternoon, as I was working in my garage, a knock came at my door. I opened it and froze. Karen stood there. No clipboard. No SUV. No smug smile. Just a woman who looked 10 years older than she had a week before. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she said quietly. I crossed my arms. You already did. On letterhead. This is different. Is it? Her eyes dropped. I didn't think anyone would ever stand up to us. That's the problem, I said. You thought you were untouchable. I lost my job, she whispered. I didn't respond. They're investigating me, she added. For trespassing. And misuse of authority. That sounds serious. She nodded, tears welling. I never meant for it to go this far. You unlocked my front door without notice, I said. That's how far you took it. She swallowed hard. I just wanted to be in control. And you lost it. For a long moment we just stood there. Then I stepped back and closed the door. Life slowly went back to normal after that. The HOA stopped sending letters. The new management company left me alone. And my cameras stayed up, just in case. But something had changed. Not just for me. For the whole neighborhood. People who had been afraid of the HOA started pushing back. Asking questions. Requesting records. Challenging fines. They realized something important. The HOA only had as much power as people let it have. And once someone proved they could be beaten, everything changed. I still see Karen's old SUV sometimes, parked outside a real estate office across town. I doubt she ever uses a master key again. And every time I walk past my front door, the one she tried to walk through without permission, I smile. Because she learned the hard way what happens when you step into a home that isn't yours. And so did everyone else.